This conference will now be recorded.
Okay,
Paul's here.
great. We got Deborah Blank here. Hey, Deborah.
Paul, sorry. Paul's here.
Paul, is that you?
Yes,
Paul?
it is. Yeah, I'm here.
Did you hear from me? Uh, so this is Stephen. Who else is here? Anybody else? Or I know
Hi,
we had
Mr.
a small
Chair.
committee.
My name is Jack McNally. I work at the FPC. I'm just here to observe. Thank you.
Jack McNally. Okay. And Jack, who do you work for again? FPC?
Yep. Yes, sir.
Great. Great. Cool. Let me write this down here. Just a second. All right. Who was that just joined on? Okay.
Hi, my name is Edgar Mendez. I don't know if this was a closed meeting, but I'm a reporter with the Neighborhood News Service, and I'm following the CCC, and I was interested in this survey.
Great. Great, Edgar. Thank you for joining. It's not a closed meeting; it's an open meeting. So we're happy. Anybody who's interested can be in the committee, and as well as be here for the meeting. And we appreciate you being here. And Jack, we appreciate you being here as well. So
Thanks.
Edgar, how do you spell your last name?
Mendez, Mendez.
And how do you spell your first name again?
Edgar, Edgar.
Okay, just making sure.
No problem.
All right. So right now I have Jack here, I have Paul here, I have Deborah here, I have Edgar here. Anybody else that I missed? All right. All right. So welcome to the Research and Survey Committee. We have an agenda. I can only stay on the call for about an hour, so I'm hoping that the goal here would be to try to get through the agenda as much as we can in an hour, and then obviously continue whatever discussion we have, which will probably be, in particular, the survey questions and doing the survey. We'll continue to do that moving forward. The first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes. I actually kind of forgot how exactly, if we were taking any minutes at all, or how exactly we were doing that. But I would, at the moment, as the acting chair of the committee, I would just request unanimous consent to move forward to the next item of the agenda, if that's okay. But it's up to you guys. Did you guys have anything that you wanted to discuss related to the minutes previously?
I didn't. I'm in favor of moving forward. I would just comment, I thought Pam was taking the minutes, but I don't know that we received a copy of the latest, so I think we should just move forward.
Okay. We'll do so. Any objection to that, by the way? Any objection to moving on to the next agenda item? Okay. All right. So next on the agenda is the election of, or the selection of, a new chair for the committee. Previously, Pam was heading the committee, and it was actually kind of her idea to kind of create this committee, and we appreciate Pam for helping to get it started to where it is now. And I appreciate the work everyone has done thus far, getting us to this point where we can kind of start making decisions on some things here. But with the second item on the agenda, do we have anyone who would like to submit their name as far as being the chair of the committee at all? Or do we have anyone who would like anyone else?
Yes, I would like to nominate Paul as the
Okay.
chair of the committee.
Do we have a second?
Hey, Stephen, is it necessary to be a member of the commission to be a chair of a committee?
From what I understand, I do not think so. I think that citizens can be the chair of the committee. I think that should be fine. So because I am not the chair of the committee, I'm going to second that motion. And Paul, would you be interested in serving as the chair of the committee?
Sure, definitely. Thank you, Deborah, for nominating me. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, you are the one who really has kept up on a lot of the issues, not just locally, but nationally. You have shared a lot of knowledge and information you've come across, as well as what you've developed. So I think you would represent us well.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
And this is Steve. I second and concur with all those opinions, and just really appreciate all the work you've done so far in the committee. What I'm going to do as the acting chair at the moment is I'm going to, first of all, entertain anyone else who has any names to nominate. I'm just going to give 3 seconds here. Okay. At this point, I'm going to ask unanimous consent for Paul to be named chair of the committee. Are there any objections? Okay. So at this point, it's the recognition of the acting chair that Paul is the new chair of the committee for research and survey. And at this point, I'm going to allow Paul to lead the meeting from here on forward. So, and just so you guys know, typically, what the committee chair would do is help to arrange the meetings, help to follow up with us on issues that are pertinent, help to set items on the agenda. So if you have any agenda items, you guys can ask Paul about that, Chair Paul. And Paul, what I would just suggest would be just moving forward, if you have a meeting time, based on our availability, just contact Linda, and Linda's fantastic about setting up the meeting and everything. So you just let her know what time it's going to be. So, all right. So with that, congratulations, Chair Paul, and I'll let you move forward. So,
Thank you. I appreciate your vote of support, and I want to mention one thing. I'm going to contact Linda and see if I can get the videos of these meetings. I don't like the fact that we don't all have a video, or that the videos aren't public, because people can't make these meetings, and even the CCC, the meetings aren't. There's no record. If you don't make the meeting, you don't know what happened. So I'm going to talk to Linda about seeing if she can just. I know she's recording the meeting, so and for taking minutes, I would like to refer to the meeting to make sure that I capture everything that's been discussed. So I'll be talking to Linda about getting the video recording of the meeting, and see if we can. I would love to see these meetings the videos posted on Legistar. I don't know if that's possible, but I'm certainly going to be working on that because I think it's important. People can't make these meetings, and we want to increase community engagement. So I'm going to follow up with Linda on that. And okay, so we're going on to the number 2. Okay, number 3, we just did short discussion of research survey thoughts. So did y'all get that? Is everybody able to access the link on the Google Doc? Deborah, Steve, have you all been able to connect to the meeting? The questionnaire spreadsheet that I put together that's on Google Docs. Have you seen it?
I have to admit I haven't, and so that's something I am making a note to do this afternoon. So I apologize for not seeing it and not connecting with it, but I'll do it this afternoon.
Do you have a link to it, Deborah? I think you might have it in an email.
I
If you,
probably do. I need to double check that. And if I can't locate it, I'll send you an email later today.
okay,
In fact,
great,
I'll
great,
send you one either way so you'll know whether I have or haven't.
perfect. Steve, I wanted to see if possible, I'd like to share my screen and show y'all so we can. I'd like to work with the doc in front of us. It might be easier to see if it's going to prove useful. So I don't know if Deborah, can you make me the presenter? Is that possible? Or Steve, can you make? Maybe I should ask Linda to do that before.
Yeah, Linda made actually Deborah the presenter, but I think moving forward in the next meeting, obviously because you're the chair now, we'll know to make you the presenter. Just because we didn't have a chair, we didn't know which one to do. I think Linda might have stepped out briefly, but if she comes back, we can do her.
Deborah, can you make me the presenter? I'm not too good with GoToMeeting, but can you make me the presenter?
I wish I could, but I don't know how. And something told me to say to Linda to make you the presenter, the
Okay,
co-organizer.
we'll get it next time. What I'm going to do, I'm going to be referring to the spreadsheet, and I wanted to just try to explain what I was attempting to convey with the way I organized the spreadsheet. And Deborah, and you're just going to have to go along with the flow here. I know if you haven't seen it yet, but and see if you've seen it. What I tried to do is in the first column, you know what, well, can't share it with Jack and Edgar at this moment, but I can, Jack and Edgar, I will send you a copy of well, I'm sorry, I take that back. I think we're supposed to keep this under our hat until we get the questions kind of more firmed up. So I won't be sharing the document. This is just work in progress. But Steve and Deborah, what I tried to do is in the first column, I reiterated what was the mandate as far as the survey goes from the CCC itself, and it said conduct an annual survey of Milwaukee residents belonging to communities that are statistically more likely to interact with members of the police department about the residents' views on police-community relations. And Dr. Malone had brought up the fact that there had been the Common Council had requested 2 police surveys already. So in that first column, you're going to see I summarized all of the survey questions from the 2019 police survey. And those questions started like in about row 20. All the questions that were in the survey. And then in the second column, I had the 4 original CCC survey questions, which Steve submitted. And in the next column, I have the questions that Dr. Pam submitted. And in the next column, I have the questions that Deborah submitted. And then I have my own questions. And then Steve added his questions again with a couple of additional questions. And so what I attempted to do then is correlate, was there an overlap between a question that the Common Council survey asked and a question that one of us asked. So it's beginning in row 23, for example, the police survey says, the Common Council survey says, thinking about the police department here in Milwaukee, how satisfied are you with the overall Milwaukee Police Department? How satisfied are you with the Milwaukee Police Department overall? Excuse me. And then in the columns following that, if for example, if Steve had a question that was similar to that, I put it in there so we can see how our questions overlap with the questions that have already been asked by the Common Council, so that we can see if we want to ask the same questions again, or maybe we can cover different things if the Common Council already made that ask that question. So for example, in response to thinking about the police department here in Milwaukee, how satisfied are you with Milwaukee Police Department overall? Steve asked a very similar question. He said, do you feel the relationship with the Milwaukee Police Department is positive? And Dr. Pam had a couple questions. Additional training could improve how law enforcement officers and people of color interact. Deborah had a question. How would you rate the current relationship between the police and the community? So the exercise I was trying to make was to see how can we sift through the questions that we've all put on the table and see which of our questions are redundant and how do they overlap with questions that have already been asked in the Common Council survey. And I know that was a long ramble. Does anyone have any questions about what I'm trying to explain there? I know if you can't see the spreadsheet right in front of you, it's a little hard, but did that
Yeah,
make
Paul,
sense?
can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I know that based on the general CCC meeting that we had, there was some concerns I know that you brought up, and I was wondering if you had thought about ways to make that into a question for the survey.
I did. I have a. We know. I think you're bringing up a good point, Stephen. Maybe let's just review all the questions that have been asked so far, and I think maybe a first beginning step then would be to see how what's the overlap between the questions that we all put on the table, and then maybe a homework assignment can be then, and where do you see that overlapping with questions that have already been asked? So we'll start with the questions that I asked, just because Steve, you brought it up, and I had a couple questions, and they're very different from what everyone else asked. And the gist of it is I'm trying to find out what do people know about what's been done so far. I mean, there's been a lot of effort already made in this regard, and we really I think it's incumbent on us to help the community understand what's already been done. Excuse me. So I asked three questions. Have you been following the results of the DOJ Collaborative Reform Initiative that was begun in 2017? And and I know you, Steve and Deborah, you know what that's about. But there was that led to the creation of the CCC, and there was the portal and the 45 hub meetings. And Deborah, you were so intimately involved with producing the CCC report. I mean, the point of my question would be to see, do we have a job to do to educate the community on what do we already have on the table? For example, the CCC had 11 major themes and perspectives, and there was a lot of issues that they wanted to follow up on, and I don't think anybody's really keeping track of what was done on any of those things. So that's the gist of that first question. The second question I had was, have you been following the results of the Charles Collins et al. Versus City of Milwaukee settlement agreement and court order that was reached in 2018? And again, this is an attempt to help the community understand what's on the table already. Some of the court orders in that settlement agreement are, in fact, the implementation of things that were called out by the DOJ. There's a huge overlap between the themes and perspectives that the Collaborative Community Committee came up with in response to the DOJ report and the court orders in the settlement agreement. And so if we're going to be an effective lobbying body, I think it's important that we consolidate what we're asking for and focus on issues that have overlap and that we've already put on the table. So again, my questions are towards what does the community know? And then the third question I had was, have you heard of the Collaborative Community Commission, this body? Because we really need to get on social media, and that's not this committee's job, but we really need to get much more in front of the community. So again, I talk a lot, so yeah, please cut me off. But Stephen, that was the questions I had on the table, and
Okay.
go ahead if anybody wants to respond. Otherwise, I was going to let's go ahead and review what all the other questions are that have been submitted, and we'll see. We'll go from there. But does anyone have any questions about what the three questions I suggested?
So Paul, I just do have a quick comment before we move forward, and that is just, after we have a discussion about the questions, I do think we might be at that time where we can discuss. I think we as a committee, we've agreed that this is going to be one larger survey, and I think we can kind of move forward in the direction in terms of having the survey divided. It's still one survey, but having it grouped as different themes, so that the questions will have the way that we organize the survey is going to be similar, like questions about similar things, like maybe background, maybe feelings about police, maybe this. And so I think we're at that point where we can kind of actually start to basically structure the survey, seeing how each of these questions are thematically similar, so that we can actually start to kind of organize the format of the survey and kind of piece this together in terms of, so that it's not all, if someone's doing the survey, it's not going to be just random from one thing to another. It's going to be kind of more cohesive, and, their mind can kind of follow it a little bit better. And I do think that we're at the point where we can actually start to really actually kind of piece this together and everything. So I'm excited about that.
My comment would be that I think we should look at hiring or contracting with someone who is very experienced in developing surveys. I think we could do exactly what Steve is talking about, making sure they're grouped and all of that. But developing a survey can be viewed as a real skill. And so what we can do is provide all the questions and the categories and all of that, and then have a skilled survey developer really look at it. We may want to, for instance, Paul, part of what you're talking about as far as educating the public, we could have a short paragraph or so with background information that gives the people taking the survey some information about what this is all for. And if we want to give a little bit of history, we can. But we also want to, for them and for ourselves perhaps, identify what is the real purpose of doing this survey, so that if we contract with the survey developer, when we look at the questions, we make sure that the questions fall back to what is the purpose? Why are we doing this? And so I think what you're talking about is great, but I would just definitely advocate for having someone who is skilled in developing a survey really look at our work, perhaps fine tune it, and position it so it's the most credible, reliable, valid tool we can make it.
That's excellent. I appreciate both your suggestions. That makes perfect sense, and also, I mean, the committee was given a direction originally. I'll read it one more time. It's from the CCC itself. It said, conduct an annual survey of Milwaukee residents belonging to communities that are statistically more likely to interact with members of the police department about the residents' views on police community relations. And I just want to throw it out to y'all. Do you think that do we want to limit ourselves to that mandate, or do we feel empowered, or that we could expand the scope of that survey, or and possibly get back to the full CCC with our suggestions for, and just go back to them and say we'd like to expand the scope of this, because the three questions that I had don't really fit in this. So what do y'all think about the current mandate for the survey? Do you think it's what, you have any opinions on it? Anyone?
Yeah. First of all, what I would say is the current mandate can be pretty broad, and there might be some ways where we can kind of tweak certain things in there. I do think so. I do agree with the idea of expanding the scope. I would also press upon just the need in terms of time, making sure that we can do things in a way where we can get the survey done and started, by the end of the year. I do think that things outside of our committee, just in terms of life, the political landscape, everything that's going on, I do think that there's a certain urgency to try to start talking to folks on the ground during the summer. So I like your ideas. I am concerned about any delay just because delay of reform, changes. Would that mean that would have to be a legislative thing with the Common Council? Like all those things might kind of present some roadblocks, but I'm definitely with you in terms of what your idea is. I just am concerned about like the heavy lifting of finishing the survey, getting it out on time, that type of thing. So
Right, I would agree, and I probably would say that that purpose or that focus is broad enough that we could fit just about everything we want in there. Because community police relations, the questions you asked about education, if you're not aware of that, then that may skew how you view police community relations. I mean, there's just so many ways in which we could look at that focus and I think fit things in. So I would probably press for us to keep going and only go back to the committee for an expansion if we felt like something we were trying to do wasn't possible to achieve based on what we have now.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks. And you know what may happen is when we come up with our major themes, if you will, for the survey and enumerate our questions, and we have to go back to the full CCC to get their approval that we are our questions, and we're going in the right direction, that we're doing the right thing, our questions are appropriate. So at that time, they can, they can either say, whatever, they can ask us to take something out or focus it more, or just say, yeah, go ahead. So Deborah, I think that's a good idea. Let's just do it. Let's just do what we were doing, put everything on the table, and let the full CCC give us some feedback on whether or not we're overstepping the scope of what we were asked to do, and then we can always dial it back a little bit, if we have to. So that's great.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I honestly think your questions are great, and I think that your questions are just entirely relevant. So, I mean, I think they're great questions. I think they're relevant. I'm excited about having them on the survey. So, if there was any pushback by the general body, I would probably, I'd have your back in terms of defending why it's relevant. So, yeah.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Maybe why don't we just then, if you haven't seen everyone's questions, and why don't we review then, unless anyone has a different idea. Let me just check the agenda here first. Yeah, we're just talking about the survey. So unless anyone has a different suggestion, I just want to go ahead and I have the Google Doc in front of me. I'm going to read off everyone's questions, and then we can, let's start identifying some overlap and see if we can begin to focus what the questions that we want to move forward with. So you heard mine, and how about if we read? I thought Deborah's questions were excellent, and There's some overlap between Steve and Deborah's questions. So let's, unless anyone has a different suggestion, I'm going to read Deborah's questions, and then we'll review Steve's questions, and finally we'll review Dr. Pam's. So Deborah asked, how would you rate the current relationship between the police and the community? So how do you rate the relationship? Second question, how do you feel the relationship between the police and the community is compared to 5 years ago? What is a positive contribution that law enforcement makes to our community? What is one thing law enforcement could do to improve community police relations? What is a major issue that affects your perception of law enforcement? So, Deborah, do you want to speak and elaborate a little bit on any of those questions? Go for it.
Okay, the only thing I would add to that is that I think the first two questions, one of them I said, how would you rate something? On those kinds of rating questions, I would suggest we have a scale. It could be a 5 stars scale, you know, 1 being poor, 5 being great, or the typical very agree, that kind of thing. But I like those. Now, if we have someone who develops surveys, they may or may not agree, but I like those because sometimes then you can see how many people rated 5 stars, 4 stars, that kind of thing. So you can start talking about percentages. But that's all I would say about my questions.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I would add, and Mr. Chairman, I would concur with what she said, and if that question overlaps with my question, I would prefer to use her question, because I do think that question is a very critical question, and I think that's going to be a very, very interesting thing to find out what people say about. So I'm excited that question is in there. So.
Right, I agree with you, and there is overlap between Steve's questions and Deborah's in that regard, and so I hope if you have time, go to that Google Doc and just look across the different questions. You'll see I have a column for each person and what questions they submitted, and just like for example, on Deborah's question, number 2, how do you feel about the relationship? I'm sorry, question 1, how would you rate the current relationship between the police and the community? And then that Steve asked the question, do you feel the relationship between the Milwaukee Police Department is positive? So both those questions are getting at the same thing. So I could just do it right now. On the document, I could just put like S2, like for Steve too, on Deborah's question, so that we could see that, Deborah's first question is aligned with Steve's second question. So we start to see if we can consolidate the questions and then pick the wording that's the best and the scale. And so Deborah, when you get to that Google Doc, you should have editing permission. Go ahead and add the scale that you would like to see used for your questions, so that we can just confirm that, fully document it.
Okay, I will.
Thank you. So again, Deborah asked, how would you rate the current relationship between the police and community? How do you feel the relationship between the police and community is compared to 5 years ago? And that question kind of aligns a little bit with the questions I was asking. I mean, the DOJ, that it's almost 5 years ago. They started in 2017 when Chief Flynn, invited the DOJ here, and so, what has changed in those 5 years? So that's a very important question. And she also asked, what is a positive contribution law enforcement makes to our community? I really think that's a useful question, because a lot of people feel that the police don't serve any useful purpose, but I mean, maybe that's a little exaggeration, but that's a great question. And that's an open-ended one. Obviously, Deborah, they could put anything they want in there, And Deborah, I want to ask you to clarify. Yeah, 4 and 5, you had what is one thing law enforcement could do to improve community police relations? And then question 5, what is a major issue that affects your perception of law enforcement? So how are they a little bit overlapping? Or what, what are you trying to, why did you put that in 2 separate questions? What, can you just elaborate a little bit what you were trying to get at with those 2 separate questions? Again, it was what is one thing law enforcement could do to improve community police relations? And then question 5 was, what is a major issue that affects your perception of law enforcement? And they're kind of getting at the same thing. If you could change one thing, what would you do? And what's the major issue that's bugging you? Well, that might be the one thing you want to change. But go ahead, Deborah. I don't know if you're muted. What do you think about having those 2 separate questions?
Well, what I was trying to do was start off with what's something positive in the question before, and then sort of what's something negative, um, or what they could improve, what's a weakness. And then that last question was supposed to focus on what's an issue, but which I was, when I developed these, I was looking at totally separate. But I definitely see what you're talking about, that those last 2 questions could be viewed as asking something very similar. So I don't know. On one hand, I have no problem if we eliminate one. On the other hand, I would say before we eliminate them, the issues one, I would just like us to say, is there a similar question that Steve or Pam asked, or is there something else we want to get to that doesn't have to do with what people want the police to improve? So I don't know if that's sounding confusing, but is there an issue that doesn't have to do with police needing to make a change? Um,
Okay.
so as I'm talking this through, I'm thinking maybe we drop that last question for now, and see if once we complete the survey, if there's a need for that kind of question, because perhaps the one about improvement will cover it. So I sort of talked myself through that. Thank you.
But Deborah, you talked me into keeping it. I mean, because I mean, they really, there is a different thing here. I don't know. Well, Deborah, if it's up to you, if you want to, maybe if you want to consolidate them into one, or we can leave it on the table now. But I mean, when you ask, what is one thing law enforcement could do to improve community police relations? Okay, so that might be more response, have a quicker response time for domestic violence calls, or more expeditious cleanup of the streets when there's a major collision, on Sherman and Capitol, to get the debris off the street. I mean, so that's a concrete action they could take. But when it comes to perception, what is the major issue that affects your perception? That might get into some of the questions that Dr. Pat was asking about whether you thought the police were treating everyone fairly or treating everyone the same. I'm getting a little echo. Steve, are you muted, or you're coming through? I think it sounds like that might be your phone. But so Deborah, you know what? Why don't we go through Dr. Pam's questions now, and we'll see what she had to say, because I think there's a difference between perceptions and actual, one thing the law enforcement could do better, like stop reckless driving, or a wish, or something we like to see them do. But perceptions they come at the relationships from a slightly different perspective. So you know what? I'll read Dr. Pam's questions, and let's keep Deborah's question about what is a major issue that affects your perception of law enforcement. let's just keep that in the back of our minds as we go through Dr. Pam's questions, because I think you'll see she hits on some of those here. And some of Dr. Pam's, she has like 17 questions and 18 questions, and they do get at different themes. So I'll read them, and if you want me to stop, if you know, I'm going to go through all 18 of them. So if there's any, you know, you might forget one of them. So if you want to make a comment, stop me right away, and we'll dive into where Pam's questions overlap with what Steve had on the table and what Deborah had on the table. So Pam's first question was, I am stopped by law enforcement when I do not believe I had broken any laws, including traffic laws. So this would, you know, it's getting at that perception of being unfairly targeted. Any comment on that one? I am stopped by law enforcement when I do not believe I had broken any laws, including traffic laws.
Yeah, this is Steve. So just so you know, I was muted during that time, so I don't know where the kind of background noise was from. But regarding Dr. Pam's question, I believe she was wanting to have, you know, a question like that to be kind of a multiple choice type of thing, like agree or disagree or vehemently agree, slightly agree, neutral, disagree, and then, you know, disagree a lot or something like that. You know what I mean? So,
you know, you're right, Steve. I think, sorry to interrupt, but I think I might have left. I think she did have a scale. Deborah, you formatted the questions very nicely in a document, and there might have been a scale in there. And I'm going to check your doc and Dr. Pam's, and if in fact she had a suggested scale or ranking or way of responding, a categorization of responses, I will add them to this document. But I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Stephen. Did you want to complete your thought on that?
no, that was all.
Yeah, that's a good point, though. And I think I might have left that level of detail off of this. I wanted to focus on the questions themselves, but it's appropriate now to go back and put a scale on them. And so, Deborah, please, on your first and second question, go ahead and edit that doc on Google Docs. You should have, if you don't have edit access, let me know, and just add your scale or send it to me in email, and I will add the scale that you would like to see applied to your first and second questions. Okay, anyways,
Okay. Thank you.
Going back to Dr. Pam's questions. Number 2, a friend or family member was stopped by law enforcement but did not believe any laws were broken. So this is similar to the first question. And Steve, both these questions kind of relate to your question. You had let's take a quick segue over to a couple of questions that Steve added. He added a couple questions in addition to the first 4 that he had put on the table. And Steve's questions were, since January 1st, 2020, have you been stopped and questioned by a City of Milwaukee police officer? A, yes, as a driver of a vehicle. B, as a passenger. Yes, as a passenger in a vehicle. C, yes, as a pedestrian, bicyclist. D, no. And the second question was, if yes above, were you frisked? Yes or no? And the third question was, if yes, did you get a ticket or were you arrested in the stop? Yes, the ticket, yes, the arrest, or no. And then Steve had kind of a follow-up. If you were stopped or frisked, but not targeted or arrested, if you were stopped or frisked, but not ticketed or arrested, but not ticketed or arrested, do you wish to provide details to the ACLU? They are soliciting stories about these situations. You can email them at stopandfrisk@acluwisconsin.org. So that whole scenario that Steve laid out of those questions kind of overlaps with Dr. Pam's first and second question. Does anyone have any thoughts about that?
Yes, I do. again, I would be interested in what the survey developer would say, but I like Steve's question because he's sort of saying, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but it feels like what he's saying is, have you experienced these things? And this is sort of factual. You were involved, you experienced, or you didn't. And so I think that's good data to collect. I have to say that typically, I'm not a big fan of yes and no questions. I like the scale, but again, who knows where the developer would come out. But with Pam's questions, I'm not as comfortable with them, even though, I mean, she does a great job. She's, really knowledgeable in this, but I am wondering if her questions could be, let me step back. When you talk about perception, I think you gave an example, Paul, where um, Pam's questions are, do you think this happened? You know, um, do you think you were stopped because of this, or do you think this happened? And so that is perception, but is that reality? I don't know. But here's another way to address that question. And it could be, and I don't know if y'all are comfortable with this, but could we ask questions taking off or borrowing from what Pam was doing to say, do you believe that African Americans experience these things more than others? Yes, some. I don't know. I'm just wondering if there's a different way, because are we trying to get to, does every person feel like this? Or do we want to know if groups feel like this more? Um, and so depending on what we're really after will determine, so does that person feel like they were discriminated against, or does that person feel like people of color are discriminated against more? So I hope you can hear that distinction that I'm trying to make.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Oh yeah, just kind of adding to a lot of the good comments that Deborah said. I think what's the reason why the questions are different is because one question is just purely factual, and you're going to get a lot of solid data that really relates to a lot of the reporting that's coming out, which I think is extremely important. A lot of Pam's questions dealt with feelings, which I also think is important because those results will allow, or at least give the opportunity to really be able to contrast how people feel when they're getting stopped versus the actual fact that they got stopped, right? And so I think it's just two different unique ways of asking a similar question. I don't think they're the same. I think they are different, but one is like a feeling based and getting a sense from people how they feel about the stops taking place, and then the other one is more of the factual, aspect of things, which I think is going to produce a lot of really good solid data. And I do think that the way that Pam's questions are phrased, if people think that there's a better way to phrase it, I think we can kind of change it up a little bit to get at the spirit of what she was trying to say. But I do think it is interesting, I guess, and important to try to get what people feel about the stuff, and then also get like the actual hard data of like, hey, have you been stopped? So.
Right. And Steve, I definitely, as I hear you explain it, I definitely can connect with that. I guess my last point was simply, and you make a good case for the way Pam has framed her questions to get to people's feelings. I guess my only question then would be, do we want to get to the individual's feelings about themselves, which now sounds valid listening to you, or do we want to get to, or are we trying to put this in a racial light or not as to what people's perceptions of police treatment of African Americans versus Latinx versus white. And depending on which one we want, I think that drives which set of questions we would go with.
Yeah, I personally think it should be more individual based
Okay.
rather than trying to have people try to extrapolate their own personal thing to how they think society feels. I think that's a lot more challenging. But
Okay, then I can back what you said, and I definitely can back Pam's questions. And I think we keep moving then.
Okay, that was a great discussion. And I wanted to suggest I'm going to go through. We're a little bit short on time. Steve, Stephen, you got a hard stop at 2:00. Is that still true?
yeah, that's true. I currently at work, and yeah, I have a break, but I do have a hard stop at 2:00 for another meeting. So
Okay, cool. Well, that's no problem. And so then and instead of me reading the rest of the other 16 questions that Dr. Pam asked, and she does get into some very specific questions about individuals' perception of racial bias in policing. So please do review her questions, which are on that Google Doc before we meet again. And feel free to email me with any suggestions. You can update the doc and put your comments in there. You can refer one question from one person to another. You can say Dr. Pam's question or Pam's question number 4 fits in here. Just feel free to edit, make this a working document and put any suggestions you have right in the document. But Steve, I wanted to ask you one follow-up question before you have to run. So just to review your questions, you said since January 1st, 2020, have you been stopped and questioned by a city Milwaukee police officer? These are factual, right? Yes, as a driver of a vehicle. Yes, as a passenger in a vehicle. Yes, as a pedestrian,
yeah,
or no. So you're setting
yeah,
a
I think
factual baseline. Go ahead.
yeah. I mean, I would say all those questions are factual based on
Right.
their
And
experience for the year.
then your second question, if yes, were you frisked? Again, it's a factual question. And then your third question was also factual. If yes above, did you get a ticket or were you arrested in the stop? Again, that's factual. But your comment, which you didn't really have as I'm not sure. Oh yeah, well, it is a question. You say if you were stopped or frisked but not targeted or arrested, do you wish to provide details to the ACLU? Steve, what if I just wonder, why do you qualify that? If you were stopped or frisked, but not ticketed or arrested, do you wish to provide details? So, can you just explain a little bit what you mean by getting that?
Sure.
Again, if you were stopped or frisked, but not ticketed or arrested, do you wish to provide details? I mean, couldn't you be harassed and ticketed and arrested and why is that mutually exclusive or what? I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I just think that like if you look at some of the reports, what you see is um, kind of what we were talking about the last CCC meeting, where there's questions about the reporting of the data and trying to get a statistical sample of how many people have been stopped in the community, but it wasn't, hypothetically speaking, it wasn't considered a stop by the police, so they may not have recorded it. And that was actually, as a plaintiff in the case, that was actually one of my experiences where I think in my situation, it was recorded, but I can see a situation where the amount of stops that actually take place in the city may be statistically reported as lower, but the reality might be much higher if it's like you're stopped by the police and nothing really happened, no one got arrested. getting a better sense of kind of how many people are actually being stopped and how many people are being stopped without any kind of tickets or any, any specific reasoning. So,
Steve, I've been looking at the data that the MPD is providing to the Fire and Police Commission per the language, per the court orders of the Collins settlement, and uh, it's stunning. And I think I might have mentioned this at the CCC, and I'll send you a link to the spreadsheets, the dashboards I put up. But the number of times that people of color, Black people, were pulled over in a traffic stop or field interview, and their vehicles were searched, they were searched, they didn't find anything, and either they got a warning or no ticket or nothing. The disparity between people of color that this scenario played out versus white folks it's absolutely stunning. I'll send you the dashboards so you can take a look at it for yourself. And so I thanks for clarifying your point. I get it now. I get exactly what you're saying now. We really need to focus on that because the data is there. The data supports exactly what you're asking about. It happens all the time. And this is I think it's poison. It can poison police community relations. Everyone in the car, everybody in their family hears about what happened, and it can create an atmosphere of oppression. And so thanks for clarifying that. And I think we need to kind of wrap it up here. I'll send you both the dashboards that I have that specifically show what Steve was asking about in this question, because it's real. And so I think that's a great line of questioning that we should keep in the survey for sure. So I think it's probably time to wrap it up now. And I encourage you to go to the Google Doc and edit it and see how I'm trying to create a structure via which we can sift our questions and find the duplicates and focus them, and then let's put themes around them and split them up in themes. So please take a look, see if where your questions overlap another person's questions, and make a little comment in there. It's, this one looks like Dr. Pam's question or whatever, and then I'll get the video from Linda. And I would like to share that video with you as well. And I'll use it for the meeting to get some meeting minutes and have the meeting minutes ready for the next meeting. And unless anything changes radically, we'll just expect another meeting. Let's see, 2 weeks from now is going to be, that's the 23rd. I think that's gonna work. I have to check. My wife is coming to visit me, so I get personal, but I am going to be having a visitor, so I might be busy, but we'll reschedule it if we need to. But anyone else have any closing comments?
Just thanks for chairing the meeting. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to have you, chairing the meeting. I got to run, and it's just good to be here and good to hear everyone's thoughts and everything. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Deborah. And we'll see you in a couple weeks, and I'll let you know if that's going to change. Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay. Bye, y'all.